thanks, Anne, for taking time to have a chat with us today. Of course, you run a very successful recruitment consultancy. So we're just excited, I suppose, to hear about what you have to say about science careers. So first of all, we're here in Tullamore College. So what do you think that schools can do to encourage more young people into science?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably, I'm sure they're doing a lot of good work in that area already, and I'm sure there's a lot more that can be done as well. I think things like engaging with, say, festivals like the Midlands Science Festival, engaging maybe with other external organisations that sort of drive and promote science. And I think as well, maybe just create more of a sort of maybe an openness about science in the school, and maybe I think sometimes when people think about science, you kind of think about, well, it's maths and it's physics and it's difficult, whereas of course science is everywhere. And I think it's maybe about just getting more of a mindset around that with the pupils and encouraging them and discussing it and bringing them sort of along in that area really through various different events.
So making it more accessible.
More accessible, absolutely, yeah.
And just because of your role in recruitment and employment, we hear now a lot that science jobs are changing all the time, and there's this line that there's jobs now that didn't exist 10 years ago, particular roles. Could you just tell us a little bit about the type of jobs you're seeing coming online now that maybe we didn't have 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah, well, I think, I suppose, and that is true, Jackie, that there are new roles coming online, but I think a lot of the existing roles though are also still there, and they also have a scientific base. Maybe we didn't just think about them that way in the past. And I just took a look this morning just out of interest at the Irish Jobs website, and I mean some of the top jobs up there this morning would be areas in software development, in biotechnology, medical research, engineering. There's always jobs in engineering in a country that has a kind of a manufacturing base, I guess, and of course the whole healthcare and life sciences area as well, and I suppose particularly around the pharma and medical device area, because they're very, very vibrant
and plenty of that in the Midlands.
And plenty of that in the Midlands, exactly. Well, the Midlands is a very strong area for pharma and medical devices, and growing, in fact, as you know probably. There's a couple of new companies coming into Athlone there, yeah.
So what would really impress you, like on an applicant's CV or job application? What would stick out?
Yeah, you might be surprised at what I'm going to say to this, but I'm saying this by virtue of, looking at CVs quite a lot, and the very first thing I would say is that there should be no misspellings or grammatical errors on a CV. In other words, don't rely on the spell check. Get somebody to proofread your CV. That would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that you should always tailor your CV to the role you're applying for. So there's no such thing as you have your CV, you have a sort of a generic CV, and then to tailor that to the role you're applying for. And the third thing then I would say is just to make sure that it's kind of laid out chronologically, so that it's very easy for someone that's trying to review the CV or do a shortlist to follow your sort of the sequence of your education and your career, and make sure that the key information is there, and ideally no longer than 2 pages.
Okay. And how do you think a candidate should prepare for an interview, for example, with one of the life sciences companies that might be recruiting? What would be your top tips for that?
Yeah, well, my top tips to prepare for an interview, and funny enough, I think the preparation starts before the interview, and a lot of it is around, and I do a lot of work with people preparing for interviews, and one of the things that I find is if you do your preparation in advance, so you need to kind of understand the role, research the company really well, and if you actually think about it, you can possibly anticipate a lot of the questions that are going to come up, because the same questions do come up time and again, and to have your answers actually ready and prepared for those, and also to be able to give some solid examples. If you're asked to maybe give an example of a particular experience, to have a solid example that you can draw on. And of course, the other thing as well, sometimes people don't always do, is to answer the questions they're asked. So be sure that you answer the question that you're asked in a nice, focused and sort of tight way.
So Elaine, thanks for coming in to have a chat with us today. You're teaching science here in Tullamore College. What's the most popular science subject in the school when people choose a subject for Leaving Cert?
Well, traditionally in the school, biology and physics would have been the two most popular in the school. Biology because it's a popular subject, and physics because the strong link with engineering. But we've found in the last few years, with the increased emphasis in STEM and increased numbers of students actually taking junior cert science, that the numbers in chemistry have grown a lot in the school, and biology has also grown here in the school too. So
Great. And are many of those students then, when they're doing Leavenscert, are they considering then a career in science or engineering or maths or technology?
Well, a lot of the students who would take a science subject at senior level would be considering it, and all those who take physics and chemistry would be. And then we are very fortunate that we have the 4 science subjects here in the school. So students who are considering strongly considering a science career have the opportunity to take more than one science subject.
Great.
So, yeah.
What type of tools do you use yourself maybe to make the science classes more interesting for the students or more interactive?
Personally, I like to start with the scientific principles of experimentation. So I would kind of deal with accuracy and the idea of variables. And I find that equips the students with the key skills that allows me to do a lot of investigative teaching. And they find that so much more interesting because they're discovering and learning for themselves. Now, we are also lucky that we would do enter a lot of lot of science exhibition competitions, and that allows the students to develop their own hypothesis and test that, and all the skills that they learn they bring back into the classroom, which also enhances the learning for them overall.
Okay, Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about what the Midlands Science Festival is all about?
So it's part of National Science Week, and we're now heading into our 4th year, and it's about getting as many people as possible engaged with science. So from a very young age, so primary school children, right up to members of the general public. So we've had children as young as 3 and 4 participate in the festival, and I think our oldest participant was 85. So it's about the general public, getting them engaged with science and seeing all that's available.
Okay, and why is it so important now to encourage more young people to consider science as a career option?
Well, I suppose what we're trying to do is twofold. One is to make the point that there are very good careers in science and technology and maths and engineering, and that there's particular skills that are needed in our country around that. And to make the point that even if you go on to study science, you're not going to end up working in a lab. You could be in business development, you could be in a communications role, you could be in a management role. But just secondly, we're also trying to educate the wider public about that. And it's about creating a certain level of scientific literacy, so that even if you never go on to study or work in science, that even just as a consumer or as a patient, that you have a certain level of literacy that allows you to distinguish between what's true and accurate and what's actually maybe not that true.
Okay, very good. Okay, so can you just tell us a couple of the highlights of these festivals you've had to date? What kind of sticks out as some of the more popular events you've had?
So I suppose we had a range of events. In schools we tend to offer things like astronomy, reptile workshops, junior Einstein. So I suppose anything that explodes and makes lots of noise tends to be quite popular with our younger audiences. So shows like Junior Einstein and the Science Circus has worked really well. And then for the general public, we've brought a number of Alchemist Cafe type forums to the Midlands, where we have really world-class scientists discussing issues in the past. We've had things like dementia, cures for cancer, superfoods, various science myths being discussed in very public forums, and we've gotten quite large audiences to that in the past.
Okay, that's great. And so, is the work you are doing making a difference? Are you seeing any, figures out there that are demonstrating that maybe this is all worthwhile?
So there's a couple of things in that. One of the things we did when we started all of this work was we looked at the Higher Education Authority of Ireland figures for the number of students in each county in the Midlands that was going on to study science and technology at 3rd level. With the exception of County Longford, the 3 other counties were all well below the national average, and we went back then again at the end of last year after 5 years and revisited it, and we were very happy to find that there have been huge increases. Nationally there have been an increase of something like 28%, and in the Midlands region there was an increase of 41%. So our rate of growth was well above the national average, and that sort of tallies with individuals, schools and groups that we would have worked at, where we would have tracked their levels of progression as well and their levels of applications to CEO courses. And then we have also tracked things like audience engagement with Behaviour and Attitudes Limited and the Edinburgh Science Festival. So we found things like 79% of people would recommend our activities to others, 82 or 3% learn something new. And we actually have the highest rate in the whole country among all of the science festivals of repeat business, that people tend to go to 2 or more events and tend to come back on the second or third day for something else, even if it's in a neighbouring county. They will travel, so we feel that's all quite positive. So Craig, can you just tell me a little bit about your current role?
So my current role is as a lecturer in UCD. So I teach in pharmacology, which is the science of how molecules interact with your body. So pharmacology is mainly concerned with medicines and looking for cures to disease, and another part of pharmacology is toxicology, which is looking at bad things and looking at things that can affect your body in a harmful way. And we look at it to try and understand how poisons and toxins work, so that we can either come up with antidotes or cures or ways to protect people from the harmful effects.
Great. And what type of personality do you think somebody should have if they're going to consider having a career in science?
So I think the main thing is curiosity. I think it's something every child has very early age. They're naturally inquisitive. You put them into a room with toys or whatever, they'll come up with ideas and they'll try things that you never tried. They're natural inventors, they're natural experimenters. So I think curiosity is the main one. I think as you go through life, just having that drive to solve problems, looking at the world around you, identifying maybe health problems or technical problems that you'd like to solve or you think will make the world a better place. I think that's a really important characteristic. And then lots of things. Some people are perfectionists, attention to detail.
Yeah.
So maybe that aspect appeals to them as well. So lots of things. But I think curiosity is the main one.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done with Midlands Science Festival, and also why it's so important to get people interested in science?
So the Midlands Science Festival is a super event. There are so many different types of events run during Midlands Science Week. There is such a breadth of different types of science talked about and available for the public to engage with. It's really brilliant. I get very excited when I look at the programme and I try and plan all the things I'm going to go to. Of course, you can't go to everything, but so in the past I've been involved for a number of years running different events. So we've done the science of coffee, the science of chocolate. We have talked about diabetes in some of the local pubs. We've talked about mind, body, universe, looking at I suppose big questions, and we had a great audience in the little theatre in Athlone. And that was a really exciting event. So all of those, it's a really positive experience for me as a scientist to be involved, and it gives me the opportunity to, I suppose, give something back and to encourage people to pursue science. I think that especially the school events, so in both in secondary schools and primary schools, there are lots of events during the Midlands Science Festival. I think that's critical because, as I said, children are natural scientists, they're natural experimenters, they're naturally curious. And I think encouraging that and fostering that and showing them this is actually something you could do for the rest of your life if you really wanted to is a very worthwhile exercise.
And what advice would you give to students that maybe are considering a career in science but aren't quite sure?
So I suppose I'm slightly biased, but I think that's what's great about science. You can start off as specific as you like if you know exactly what you want to do, or you can keep as general as you want. When I was entering, I suppose, the senior cycle, the Leaving Cert cycle, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I liked science. I knew I was fascinated by the natural world and how the body worked and what happened when you got a disease. But I had no idea how I wanted to translate that into a job. So I think the general science degree is brilliant from that perspective, because it allows you to go in and try a little bit of everything. It gives you the opportunity to figure out what works for you. I always say life is hard, work is hard, and it's hard enough as it is. It makes it a bit easier if you're working at something you really enjoy and something you're passionate about. And I think that's the thing, to try and figure out what lights that fire in your brain, what gets your heart beating a little bit faster, and where you want to go. And science is a great avenue to let you figure that out. It gives you space to figure out what your passion is.